When people talk about attraction, they often think of physical appearance, playing hard to get, or using specific dating strategies. But here's the thing, what really makes a man become chemically addicted to your presence isn't about how you look or the games you play. It's about understanding the neurochemistry of how certain behaviors trigger powerful hormonal responses that he literally can't stop craving. Think about it. Brain chemistry has the power to create addiction in an instant. The right interaction at the right moment can trigger a dopamine response so profound that it creates a biological need to experience it again. That's what creates true addiction, not your looks, not your tactics, but the neurochemical experience you create through your presence. A woman who creates addiction isn't one who's always available or constantly pursuing. She's someone who moves through the attraction cycle with intention and understanding, making her presence rare but neurologically powerful. She understands that what we do creates chemical reactions, especially when it comes from a place of authentic connection rather than manipulation. Think about the most addictive experiences in your life. They're not the constant predictable pleasures that you can have anytime. They're the perfectly timed moments of intense connection followed by absence that hit your brain at exactly the right moment, creating a biochemical response you can't control or forget. That's not about being constantly present. That's about creating a cycle of neurological impact when it matters most. When a man experiences these specific phases of the attraction cycle with you, something shifts in his brain chemistry. You're no longer just someone he's dating or interested in. You become the biological experience his brain craves, the neurochemical connection he can't stop thinking about. But here's what's critical. These phases aren't about manipulating someone or playing mind games. They're not about pretending to be someone you're not. They're about creating genuine moments of connection that tap into his deepest neurological pathways he might not even realize exist until you activate them. What makes this attraction cycle so powerful is that it creates specific neurochemical responses that trigger the same brain pathways involved in addiction. Space for dopamine spikes, time for serotonin bonding, and moments for oxytocin connection. This rhythm is where addiction grows, because we don't become addicted to what's always available. We become addicted to what creates an irreplaceable biological response. Some of you might be thinking, but shouldn't attraction happen naturally without planning these cycles? Absolutely. Authenticity is essential, but there's a difference between understanding brain chemistry and manipulating someone. It's like the difference between randomly exercising versus understanding how to train for specific results. Both are genuine efforts, but one creates a much more powerful impact. When you engage with the attraction cycle intentionally, you're not performing or trying to trick anyone. You're creating genuine connection by aligning your interactions with the brain's natural chemical reward system. And when those interactions trigger his deepest neurological pathways, that's when addiction begins. So let's talk about the first phase of the attraction cycle, what I call the dopamine trigger. This is about creating moments of unexpected pleasure. And it sounds something like this. I noticed something about you that surprised me in the best way. Most people make the mistake of being completely predictable in relationships, always available, always responding the same way, always following the same patterns. There's nothing wrong with consistency, but it doesn't create addiction because the brain's dopamine system requires novelty and surprise to activate fully. What makes a man become chemically addicted is when you trigger dopamine responses that he doesn't anticipate. Let me share a real example. I was coaching a woman named Melissa who was dating a man who seemed interested but wasn't pursuing her with any real enthusiasm. When we analyzed their interaction patterns, I noticed she was extremely consistent, always replying immediately to texts, always agreeing to his suggestions, always showing the same level of interest. I suggested she introduce some unexpected variants, surprising him with an observation about him nobody else noticed, initiating an unplanned activity that tapped into his interests, or responding with thoughtful unpredictability. The next time they were together, instead of her usual compliments, she spontaneously said, "I noticed how you adjust your approach when talking to different people. You're incredibly perceptive about what each person needs." That surprised me in the best way. His reaction? He couldn't stop talking about that moment for days. 2 weeks later, he was planning their future together. Why did this work? Because she triggered a dopamine spike by creating an unexpected positive experience. His brain started thinking, she sees something in me that feels amazing, but I never know exactly when or how she'll surprise me next. That's exactly what this first phase does. It creates a neurochemical reaction where he associates your presence with pleasure that can't be predicted or controlled. And that's the key distinction. Validation that creates addiction isn't about generic praise like, "You're so handsome," or "You're really successful." There's nothing wrong with those compliments, but they don't trigger dopamine because they're expected. What triggers addiction is when you recognize something specific about him that he values deeply, but rarely gets acknowledged for. Something that makes him feel seen in a way no one else sees him. This first phase isn't about neediness or excessive flattery. It's about genuine psychological insight. It feels like emotional intelligence, not manipulation, because when you can surprise someone with how clearly you see their inner qualities they value but think go unnoticed, you create a dopamine response so powerful they literally can't stop thinking about how it felt when you said it. The second phase of the attraction cycle is what I call the serotonin bond, and it might surprise you because it's not about creating excitement, but rather comfort and security. When I'm with you, my entire nervous system relaxes in a way it rarely does with anyone else. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds too vulnerable or too simple. How could something so straightforward create addiction? But here's the neurochemistry behind it. Most people make the critical mistake of focusing only on excitement and attraction, creating dopamine spikes without ever establishing the serotonin foundation that makes someone feel safe enough to become addicted. This phase is powerful because it does something counterintuitive. It balances the unpredictable dopamine highs with the steady, calming presence of serotonin. Your presence becomes associated not just with excitement, but with a unique form of neurological comfort that he can't find elsewhere. And one of the biggest mistakes I see is when women create excitement and mystery, but never acknowledge the profound comfort that comes with true connection. I worked with a client named Rebecca who was always creating excitement with the man she was dating, adventure dates, passionate encounters, stimulating conversations, but she noticed he would pull away periodically. When we dug deeper, I realized she was triggering plenty of dopamine, but not activating his serotonin pathways. I challenged her to balance this with moments of simple, peaceful connection, where she explicitly acknowledged the comfort they created together. The next time they were relaxing after dinner, she gently said, "I just realized my nervous system completely relaxes when we're together like this. That's rare for me." The result? He called her the next day specifically to tell her he hadn't stopped thinking about what she said. 3 weeks later, he told her he felt something with her he'd never experienced before. A sense of excitement and peace simultaneously. Their relationship deepened dramatically after that. Why did this work? Because she acknowledged something men rarely hear, that their presence creates a unique form of safety. He starts thinking, she feels something with me she doesn't feel with others. I'm not just exciting to her, I'm irreplaceable in how I affect her nervous system. And that's exactly what this second phase does. It creates a neurochemical bond where he associates you with a feeling of safety that becomes addictive, precisely because it's so rare in his experience. But, and this is crucial, this isn't about faking a sense of peace or manipulating with vulnerability. That kind of inauthenticity is transparent and ultimately backfires. This is about genuinely recognizing and expressing the unique comfort you feel in someone's presence when it truly exists. When you use this approach, deliver it during a quiet, unhurried moment when you genuinely feel that sense of peace. Look him in the eyes, use a soft voice, and express it as a simple observation, because that's how serotonin works, in states of calm awareness. The beauty of this phase is that it communicates multiple neurological messages at once. You're emotionally intelligent enough to recognize valuable states of being. You value quality connection over constant stimulation, and you associate him with a rare form of neurological well-being. That combination becomes a serotonin-driven addiction for a man who's used to women either pursuing him with anxiety or keeping emotional distance. Now, let's talk about the third phase of the attraction cycle, the most powerful one of all. This is what I call the oxytocin completion, and it's centered around creating physical and emotional closeness followed by healthy separation. The connection we just shared will stay with me even when we're apart. This phase works on such a profound neurochemical level because it speaks to one of the brain's core needs, the need for bonding, coupled with the security of knowing that bond remains even during separation. This creates the complete addiction cycle in the brain, but there's a critical distinction here between neediness and confident connection. Neediness is saying, "I'll miss you so much when you're gone," or "I hate being apart." That's about your insecurity. Confident connection is about acknowledging the bond that exists whether you're physically together or not. It's about recognizing the permanence of your impact on each other. I remember working with a woman named Sophia who was dating a man who had a demanding career requiring travel. She'd been trying to make the most of their time together by maximizing every minute and then expressing how much she'd miss him. This only created pressure and made him associate their goodbyes with negative emotions. After we talked about the oxytocin cycle, the next time after they'd shared a particularly close evening, she simply said as they were parting, "The connection we just shared will stay with me even when we're apart." It's rare to find that kind of staying power. 3 days later, while traveling, he called her and said no one had ever made him feel both so connected yet so free from guilt when they were apart. 6 weeks later, he had rearranged his work schedule to be home more often. What makes this phase so neurologically addictive is that it releases oxytocin during closeness, but doesn't create the anxiety often associated with separation. When you acknowledge the permanence of your connection while simultaneously giving space, it creates a complete addiction loop. His brain learns that connecting with you provides bonding chemicals without the crash of anxiety when you're apart. And this is much different from the typical approach most people take. Most people either cling when connection is strong, creating anxiety about separation, or they detach completely to avoid that pain. Both strategies block true addiction from forming. The oxytocin cycle works because it maintains the emotional bond through physical separation, creating a constant neurological presence even in your physical absence. This message must be delivered with absolute authenticity. Don't say it if you're actually feeling insecure about the separation. The power lies in the genuine security you feel in the connection itself, independent of constant presence. When you truly believe your connection transcends physical togetherness, that confidence communicates itself non-verbally and triggers his oxytocin system to maintain attachment even when you're apart. When a man experiences this, the ability to feel deeply connected without the anxiety of maintaining constant contact, he experiences something rare and irreplaceable. He starts to see himself through your eyes as someone worthy of connection that transcends typical relationship dynamics. That's rare, that's powerful, and it makes him want to return to that feeling, not just in that moment, but consistently. Now that you know these 3 phases of the attraction cycle, let's talk about how to implement them effectively. Because timing and sequence are everything when it comes to brain chemistry. The most beautiful words said at the wrong moment or with the wrong intention lose their power completely. First, understand that these phases are not lines to memorize or steps to follow mechanically. They're a framework for creating the neurochemical experiences that lead to addiction. The exact words matter less than creating the right brain states in the right order. This is where the use with caution part comes in. Many people hear about techniques like these and immediately want to use them all at once, as if they're casting a spell. But relationships aren't magic tricks. They're living, breathing connections that require authenticity. So here's my first caution. Never activate these cycles if you don't genuinely feel the emotions behind them. Men have an incredible radar for neurological incongruence. When your words say one thing, but your nervous system communicates another. True addiction forms when your internal state matches your external expression. Second, understand the power of neurochemical variety. If you create the same type of experience constantly, the brain adapts and no longer produces the same chemical response. This is why I emphasize cycling between these phases rather than following a rigid formula. I worked with a client who made the mistake of trying to create surprise, dopamine triggers, in the exact same way repeatedly. By the third surprise date she planned, her partner actually called her out, saying it felt formulaic. That's not the addiction we want. These phrases should feel spontaneous, genuine, and rare. The dopamine trigger works best when it's truly unexpected, not just in what you say, but when you say it. If he's just shown you that unique quality you're recognizing, that's when you say, I noticed something about you that surprised me in the best way. The immediacy connects the recognition to the specific behavior, reinforcing it and creating that dopamine hit. The serotonin bond should be established during naturally calm moments when you're both already relaxed. Trying to create this state when either of you is stressed will feel forced and inauthentic. Wait for those natural moments of peace, perhaps after a meal or during a quiet evening, and then acknowledge the unique comfort you feel. The oxytocin completion should be initiated after you've experienced genuine closeness, emotional or physical, and ideally when separation is about to occur naturally rather than being manufactured. After a particularly connecting experience, as the evening is naturally concluding, that's when you acknowledge the lasting impact. And there's something else I want you to understand about cycling through these phases. It's about creating rhythm, not rigidity. Sometimes you'll activate dopamine multiple times before moving to serotonin. Other times you'll move from oxytocin directly back to dopamine. The key is understanding which neurochemical state needs activation based on your interaction pattern. If you've been creating a lot of excitement and surprise, it might be time to establish serotonin security. If you've been in a period of calm comfort, perhaps it's time for unexpected pleasure again. This responsiveness to the emotional state between you is what makes the cycle feel natural rather than forced. And that naturalness is what makes it truly addictive. There's something else I want you to understand about this attraction cycle. It's not just about making someone addicted to you. It's about understanding how human connection works at its most fundamental biological level. These phases aren't just about attraction, they're about creating the kind of connection where addiction happens naturally. Think about the relationships in your life that have had the most profound impact. They weren't the ones where everything was always exciting or always comfortable. They were the ones that moved rhythmically between different emotional states, creating a neurological dance that kept you engaged at the deepest level. That's what these phases help create, not just addiction, but meaningful connection. And that's why I want to emphasize something important. These phases are powerful tools, but they're not substitutes for genuine compatibility. If you're using them with someone who doesn't share your values, who doesn't treat you with respect, who isn't emotionally available, no neurochemical cycle in the world will create a healthy addiction. It might create temporary interest, but not the lasting connection you deserve. Use these phases with someone who's already showing up, who's already interested, who's already demonstrating the qualities of a good partner. That's when they become truly transformative, when they enhance what's already there, rather than trying to manufacture something from nothing. And remember that while these attraction cycle phases create powerful neurochemical responses, what sustains addiction over time is consistency within variety. The brain adapts to patterns, but craves both security and novelty. That's the balance that keeps addiction alive. A man doesn't stay chemically addicted to techniques alone. He stays addicted to the woman behind those techniques. A woman who understands the rhythms of connection, who knows how to create neurological states that feel irreplaceable, who can express genuine emotions without becoming predictable. That's the balance that creates not just temporary fascination, but lasting devotion. So yes, these three phases of the attraction cycle can create powerful brain responses that make him think about you constantly, that shift how his neurology responds to you from someone he's dating to someone he literally craves on a chemical level. They can tap into his brain's reward system in a way that generic interaction never will. But their true power comes from the authentic experiences behind them. When you engage these cycles and truly mean them, when they come from a place of genuine connection rather than strategic calculation, that's when they become transformative. The woman who creates addiction isn't trying to trick a man's brain. She's simply expressing her authentic self in a way that aligns with how human connection naturally develops. She's creating surprise when it's genuine, comfort when it's real, and acknowledging true connection when it exists. That kind of rhythm doesn't just make a man chemically addicted, it creates the kind of neurological bond that both people crave, where you're not just desired, but truly irreplaceable, not just wanted in the moment, but needed over time. And that's not just addiction, that's love in its most biologically fundamental form. Because in the end, true addiction isn't about manipulation or mind games. It's about creating such a profound neurochemical experience that he can't imagine his life without it. It's about understanding that the brain responds most powerfully not to constant pleasure, but to meaningful contrast, to the dance between dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin that creates a complete picture of connection. The attraction cycle doesn't just make him addicted to your presence, it helps both of you create the kind of relationship where addiction is mutual, where both people experience the full spectrum of neurochemical connection. And when both people are creating that experience for each other, you don't just have addiction, you have something far more valuable, a relationship where both people feel truly seen, truly comforted, and truly connected, even when apart. That's not just chemistry, that's alchemy.